Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Amir Sahib has just told me that there are some members from various branches who have so far not been given an opportunity to sit with me in a question and answer session. So if they have to ask a question, we shall give them priority tonight. Then if the time is left, then we'll turn to the questions sent by ladies.
Pour moi, ce que vous voulez dire, c'est qu'il y a certaines branches qui peuvent gagner l'occasion de faire une session de questions-réponses avec lui et qui sont présents ici et qui peut-être déjà voudraient poser certaines questions. Donc, je connais une priorité pour poser des questions. Ensuite, quand je dois terminer, là, nous avons une question qui finit de recevoir le débat de madame.
Oui. Please.
Oui, alors, le membre de cette branche-là, je vais venir devant. C'est une priorité.
Mubarak was the one who was to ask a question. I said tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes. So I am going to have my promise fulfilled with you.
Yes.
Right.
Assalamu alaikum, Huzur.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Huzur, in one of your sermons, you revealed that according to your personal research, Pharaoh was not drowned, but Allah saved him instead, and he lived after that. In one of your khutbah Jummah.
You see, what I said, I first translate this question.
No, can I continue the question?
The question I understand, but all right, explain it in short terms, please.
Yes. In Surah Yunus, where this incident is related, after having submitted or confessed his belief in the God of the children of Israel, Allah says, what now, while thou wast disobedient before this, and was of those who create disorder, so this day we will save thee in thy body, that thou mayest be assigned to those who come after thee. My question is, could Huzur inform us whether there has been a real conversation between Allah and Pharaoh? If yes, does it mean that despite knowing of the existence of Allah, Pharaoh lived a life of disbelief? And thirdly, was there not a legitimate right on behalf of Pharaoh to claim back?
Why you have a very clear voice otherwise, but yes, this microphone has distorted it. So yes, I can't clearly follow you what you're saying.
My question is,
yes, now it's clear.
Could Huzur inform us whether where this incident is related, there has been a real conversation between Allah and Pharaoh?
Conversation?
Yes. If
not
yes,
confrontation, yes.
If yes, does it mean that despite knowing of the existence of Allah, Pharaoh lived a life of disbelief? And thirdly, after being saved from being drowned, was there not a legitimate right on his behalf to claim back his throne after being saved, while history does not apparently make any mention of it?
Bring the question, I think, to better for me to translate. I'll go direct to the questions.
Huh?
I'll go direct to his questions.
Right.
Alors, à cause de l'incident de Pharaon, quand il est noyé, enfin, il dit comme ça qu'il a apprécié à mon qui tu fais, et Allah t'a sauvé et il n'est pas noyé. Alors, il demandait si pas il y a une vraie conversation entre Pharaon et Allah. Ça, c'est la première question. Si oui, est-ce que ça veut dire que malgré le fait que Pharaon est au courant de l'existence d'Allah, il amène la vie d'un incroyant? And thirdly, has there been a legitimate right on behalf of Pharaoh to claim back his throne after being saved? Oui, alors, troisième question, c'est est-ce que Pharaon a un droit légitime pour redemander ce trône après qu'il ait fini sauvé, parce que l'histoire n'a fait aucune mention de ça.
You see, it is not correct to say that Pharaoh was not drowned, because the Holy Quran uses the word gharq, which means drowning. But the issue is not this. The issue is whether during his gharq, he gave up his life, or was he saved miraculously by God in keeping with his promise? That is the issue. And although all other commentators believe that Pharaoh was drowned and died during that drowning, some people are saved after drowning. So the Arabic dictionaries and Arab scholars support this view. It's not just what I have invented myself. That gharq does not necessarily mean that somebody died during drowning. If he goes under and is overwhelmed with water, you declare him to be gharq. But sometimes people dive for them and save them. And despite the gharq, the life is saved. That is one thing you should remember clearly. So he was certainly made to be gharq. Gharq means drowned. All right? Now we read a very interesting dialogue in which the Holy Quran is unique. It is not at all anywhere else mentioned in any biblical records or apocrypha and other things. The New Testament and Old Testament, they are totally dumb over it. They don't know what happened. But we know from the Quran that a dialogue did take place while he was in the act of drowning. فَلَمَّا أَدْرَكَهُ الْغَرْقُ. These are the words of the Quran. When the drowning approached him, he was in the process of being drowned. He turned to God and said, "Oh God, now I believe in the God of Moses and Aaron." The answer was, "Al-ana?" Now? What do you mean? The time for seeking forgiveness is over. Gharq has reached you. How could we accept your tawbah now while you were given so many chances before? 9 big signs he saw and rejected one after the other. So you can't be saved in spirit. That is one translation. The other is, "Nunajjika bi badaneka," is the promise, we will save your body. So the question is, does it mean that we will save your body as dead body, or we will save your body as live body? And what does Allah imply here? Does he mean that Pharaoh's bodily life will be saved, although his spirit will not be saved? That can also be an interpretation. The other interpretation, which is also valid, I can't reject it, is this, that only your body will be saved without life. So, keeping these two possibilities in view, I investigated. I found evidence from the dead bodies of the pharaohs which were mummified and which have come up for the researchers to examine and find out what happened. None of these bodies bears any mark of drowning. None. They died natural deaths. So I carried my research beyond the time of Moses to the time when there were not pharaohs but muluk. Like in the time of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, there were times when instead of pharaohs there were muluk. Up to that period, I investigated and found that none of the pharaohs is found to have died by drowning. And the mummies which are thrown up, they also repeat the same story. And when I turned to history, I was amazed to find that the so-called Pharaoh who confronted Moses lived many years after him. And that was one Pharaoh who attacked Israelites repeatedly, made excursions into their territories and went on as if he was taking his revenge from something. And this part of history is most amazing and confounding for historians themselves. Why should he start attacking the Israelites? And what happened to Moses and others? Did he come into confrontation with them? Or what was it? And they discovered that it was not Moses and his followers, but there were other Israelites before them who had settled in those territories. And he was trying to destroy them, though he failed. Yet, as far as the history of Egypt is concerned, it does not carry any evidence of that Pharaoh having been drowned and saved. Another dilemma. So when I read more history, I discovered a very interesting fact, in which a historian, this was revealed by a historian, who says that it was a custom with the Egyptians not to record the defeats and acts of shamefulness concerning their pharaohs. It was tabooed. Even if they were heavily beaten at the hands of their enemies, the historians will totally omit this fact. Only their victories were highlighted and recorded. So their silence about his confrontation with Moses and having been drowned, at least temporarily, is omitted from the history because it was an act of shame against him. It was an act of shame against the pharaohs as a whole, for a small, insignificant enemy to have escaped them and a large number of their forces having been drowned. So these are the facts which I collected. Now the issue was whether to translate the Quran in a manner which is belied by known facts of history and science, or to take the other option, which can be reasonably achieved from the study of the Quran. The other option, which means that God promised to Pharaoh, I will save only your body, not your soul. The body not against life, but against soul. That means you will live like a zombie. You will have no spiritual life in you. And because the last minute beliefs do not pay any benefit to such person who gives in. So if he was saved from death in drowning, and his body was recovered and resuscitated, then what we should see about him, according to the Quran, would be not the life of a believer. He must have gone back upon his old belief. Moses had gone, escaped, issue was over. Why should he start believing when he was saved? Why should he not doubt that I was saved by chance? That is the figure of Moses, the Pharaoh, which we see recorded by history. He does not believe in Moses anymore. Only it was an act of seeking not forgiveness from Allah, but seeking to save his life. No more. And to cover his shame and take his revenge, he went on into excursions deep into the Israelite territories to establish to the world that after all I am not that defeated. I am still live and kicking, and I can take my revenge. So this is the image of Pharaoh which appears to be, which is not contradictory to this observation of the Quran. In fact, I believe this is the only explanation which perfectly tallies the real history of that Pharaoh with the known facts of history. Yet I do not rule out the other part, if evidence comes. There's a big if involved. If the evidence is revealed that a Pharaoh who confronted Moses died during his temporary drowning, then of course we can revert to the other possibility of translating the Quran in a different manner. But as long as that evidence is not available, we should not abandon the Quran. We must follow the other version of the Quranic explanation, which is held good in view of the scientific revelations and historical revelations. Now you understand my point of view clearly? Okay. All aspects are covered? Good. Jazakumullah.
Pour commencer, vous allez dire comme ça qu'il n'est pas correct pour dire qu'il n'est pas noyé. Parce que le Coran servait le mot gharak. Alors, si il dit mot avec sa.
You understand?
La question est si pas il dit mot ou bien il dit sauvé quand il est noyé. Tout bon commentateur croit qu'il dit mot. Mais seulement, comme on connaît, il y a un monde qui n'a pas noyé, mais seulement pas mot, sauf eux. Le mot gharak qui servait dans le Coran, pas veut dire qu'il est un mot. Parfois, il y a des gens qui coulent et ils font s'il peut noyer, mais seulement sur la vie sauvée.
It was about to be drowned and saved.
Alors, il y a un dialogue, quand cet incident-là qui peut arriver, il y a un dialogue bien intéressant qui est arrivé. Et là-dedans, le Coran est unique. Mais il n'y a aucun autre livre qui parle de ce dialogue-là. Parce que les autres ne pas connaissent exactement qui est arrivé. C'est-à-dire, pendant qu'il est noyé, Pharaon, il tourne vers Allah et il dit comme ça qu'il me croit maintenant dans le Dieu de Moussa et de Haroun. Alors Allah dit comme ça, est-ce qu'il maintenant qui te croit, comment se fait-il qu'à ce là qui est arrivé à croire? Après il dit comme ça, malgré tout ce signe qui te donne, il a dit qu'il y a 9 grands signes, mais il n'a pas de croire, mais à ce là, il est dans les mots, il a le croire. Alors, une signification qui dit qu'il n'est pas capable de sauver en esprit, mais seulement pour seulement sur les corps. Maintenant, ça les corps là, c'est pas de sauver. Il tout simplement les corps momifiés ou bien il est dans la vie dedans. Ça c'est une autre question comme si que nous vous a répondu. Et quand Allah fait une jali qui nous peut sauver toi seulement, nous peut sauver toi, il est capable non seulement sur les corps, mais sans la vie. Et vous autres, là, on fait une investigation, on fait une enquête, on fait une preuve qui dit que les corps qui sont momifiés en Égypte, qui en a déjà encore, aucun de ces corps-là n'a fait aucun signe de noyade. De tout, de la mort naturelle. Aujourd'hui, on fait une pousse recherche un peu plus loin, jusqu'à même l'époque de Hazrat Moussa, un petit peu plus avant, jusqu'à l'époque de Tchenaman, comme si les rois, c'est pas Tchenaman Pharaon, qu'à l'époque de Hazrat Youssouf. Et ça, l'enquête fait montrer qu'aucun de ces du monde qui vivent à l'époque-là, je pas de mot avec aucun de ces chefs-là, pas de mot avec la noyade. Et quand on fait une investigation, momie même, nous disons momie, les autres aussi ont trouvé qu'il n'y a pas aucun signe de noyade. D'après l'histoire, nous trouvons que Pharaon, tu vis après, et qu'il a fait une attaque aux Israéliens. Alors, quand ces affaires-là, il finit d'étonner même l'historien aussi. Là, ils ont découvert qu'il n'est pas de attaque Moïse, Hazrat Moussa, mais plutôt les autres Israélites qui étaient déjà établis là-bas. Aujourd'hui, il essaie de chercher une preuve en cours de l'histoire de l'Égypte. Nous gagnons pas trop d'évidence qui est comme si tu es mort, tu es noyé et tu es sauvé. Mais seulement, ce que nous trouvons dans l'Égypte, c'était une coutume qui, je ne sais pas jamais je peux raconter, je peux recorder action qui est ban chef bien ban pharaon tu fais quand tu peux perdre comment dire un acte de la honte je pas tu mets ça je pas tu peux garder aucun record de ça seulement ban action continue la victoire ça même qui je tu garde un record donc ça silence là il élimine sa possibilité qui l'était noyé là parce que c'était un acte de honte, alors je n'ai pas fait une note ça. C'est-à-dire dans l'histoire de bataille. Aujourd'hui, j'ai fait encore recherche, je trouve une cherche ban fait. De là, nous avons trouvé que ce que le Coran dit, ça n'est pas comme si l'histoire aussi supporte ça. Mais maintenant, nous allons prendre l'autre option là aussi. Qui finit sauver seulement dans le corps et non pas sur l'âme, à dire qu'il n'est pas dans aucune la vie spirituelle, parce qu'il se conversion de la dernière minute pas dans aucune valeur. Et quand il est sauvé aussi, il n'est pas amené la vie d'un croyant, mais il continue à douter et qu'il est accepté Allah Allah seulement pour qu'il soit la vie capable de sauver. Et il continue attaque les Israéliens pour les couvrir la honte qu'il a gagnée, sa défaite qu'il a gagnée avec Moïse, avec Moussa. Et vous avez cette image de Pharaon là, il n'est pas en contradiction avec le Coran et il y a une preuve historique pour supporter ça. Mais c'est même pas éliminer ça l'autre possibilité là, mais aussi longtemps qu'il n'y a pas une évidence, une preuve bien claire, nous vous besoin attache-nous avec sa croyance, nous attachons avec ce que le Coran dit et qui en réalité qui est en accord avec les faits scientifiques et les faits que nous connaissons pas maintenant.
Good. Next, please. You are from a different branch? Are you from outside here? Right. Right. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
It is said in the Holy Quran, chapter 4, Al-Nisa, verses 87. When ye are beaten with the beatings, beat ye with the better beatings, or at least return it. We know during the Holy Prophet's time, the Jews used to curse the Muslim by saying, the tongue by saying, Assalamu alaikum.
Right.
Or the Holy Prophet ordained the Muslim to answer them by wa alayka.
Not wa.
Alayka.
Alek.
In the Umayyad times, we know once and at the railway station of Lahore, he refused to answer the salam of al-Ikram. Now, my question is, as we are living in the military Russian country, we are surrounded by police. If it happened, as usually happened to me, my friends Hindu say Assalamu alaikum to me. What will my answer? Wa alayka or wa alaykum salam?
Yes. You have gone into. Oh, yes, please, question, please. Yes.
Une cite un verset Coran, ensuite un verset Coran qu'on dit comme ça quand faire salam, on dit d'une meilleure façon, ou soit au moins on dit ce qu'il fait Dieu. Alors ensuite il fait une cite comment un juif, tu peux au lieu qu'il dise salam, tu peux dire salam, pour le prophète et il peut dire répondre à l'aide. Alors, après une cite qui Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam qui refuse de répondre salam de Pandit Ekram. Et ensuite, il dit comme ça qu'étant donné que nous vivons dans une société multiraciale, si la mandimoun, hindou, vini, dit fais-nous salam alaikum, comment nous faisons répondre?
I personally feel that you have extended the argument from one area to another area which is not related. what you related by way of a tradition, there the situation was a completely different one, where there were hypocrites who used to twist their tongues, as the Holy Quran bears witness to that, and say things similar to the Muslim style, but meant something else, and by the twist of the tongue, they made the word a different word. Assalamu alayka means peace be upon you. But Assamu alayka means curse be upon you, destruction be upon you. So some hypocrites did this to Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Once it is reported that somebody said this, and Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said something in answer. And as far as I remember, it was Aisha who pointed out, Ya Rasulullah, didn't you notice that he didn't say Assalamu alaikum? He said Assamu alayka. Rasulullah sallam in answer said, didn't you notice what I said? I didn't say wa alaikum, I said alayka. Alayka means not me, on me and at you. Wa means and on you. But if you remove the wa, it means not on me, on you alone. So this has nothing to do with the report of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam having not answered Lekram. When Lekram said Assalamu alaikum to him, he refused to answer and explained why. He said, he curses my Lord, my Master, and says salam to me, I'm not going to accept that salam. That was an expression of deep love and devotion for Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These two things are not to be related at all. You understand the point? Yes.
He's asking if somebody, a Hindu, asks him, say salam alaikum to him, how he should answer.
I have already explained. I think he's got the message. Everything you wanted to find out is explained? Okay then.
Je veux dire comme ça qu'il amène ça argument-là un petit peu loin, il y a deux cultures qui n'ont pas trop aucune relation entre eux. Dans les traditions du Saint Prophète, c'est qu'il finit dire, c'est que tu as un hypocrite qui comme si tu peux tourner une phrase d'une telle qualité pour qu'ils aient donné une autre signification. Par exemple, vous dire comme ça qui Assalamu alaikum veut dire comme ça la paix, mais Assalamu alaikum veut dire qui malédiction, destruction. Et c'est des hypocrites que tu peux faire comme ça avec le Saint Prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Dans une tradition rapportée qui une fois, un juif finit dire le prophète quelque chose et le prophète finit reconnu. Alors, vous êtes à chaque fois comme ça au prophète, vous trouvez, il va finir dire Assalamu alayka, il finit dire comme ça telles affaires. Assalamu alayka. Alors, le prophète dit comme ça, est-ce qu'il te pas entendu comme il finit dire pas dire wa alayka, on dit alayka. Tout simplement, zis le toi. Il y avait cette malédiction, le prophète dit le toi seulement, le prophète dit et le toi aussi. Et concernant Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam, lui, il refuse de répondre salam de l'écran. Et je donne une explication pour ça. Il y a comme ça que l'écran, les maladies, les maudits, les dire mauvaises paroles, le Saint Prophète Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, c'est pourquoi on ne peut pas capable de répondre ce salam. Et ça, c'était une expression d'amour de la part de Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam, de grand amour de la part de Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam pour le Saint Prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Next question, please. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I am from Triyoli.
Yes.
So far as I have learned that since Adam alayhi salam up to now, we are living about 7,000 years.
No, 6,000 have passed. We are in the 7th.
Yes.
That's right.
So, according to the zoologists, after doing research of 7th December 1990, it has been proved that they have get the osament of hippopotamus dated of 20,000 years. And recently, on 5 December 1990, the zoologists discovered the skeleton of some hippopotamus dated to 5,000 years, 500,000 years.
It's 500.
Yes.
Right.
So I seems in contradiction according to Islam, according to religion and the zoologist. So I want to have some explanation on this.
I'll explain, inshallah, after the translation.
Oui, alors la question c'est que depuis Hazrat Adam jusqu'à maintenant, nous finissons vivre environ 6 000 années, ou l'autre 700 000. Et il finit deux cas, quand ben zoologue. Ben géologue, ou bien zoologue. Dire comme ça, qui ont fait une découverte, après une certaine revue, en 1990, ils ont fait une découverte qui ont fait trouver un hippopotame, ce squelette, qui date de 20 000 années. Ensuite, plus tard, ils ont fait trouver un autre qui date de 500 000 années. Alors, ils demandent toujours, ils trouvent une petite contradiction, ils demandent une petite explication.
You see, the Holy Quran nowhere says that Adam was the first man. It's not mentioned anywhere. So where did you take it from? Adam was not the first man. So if he is only 6,000 years ago, this fact does not contradict any statement of the Quran. The Holy Quran tells us he was the first Khalifa. First man and first Khalifa are two different things. And when the Holy Quran tells us about the dialogue between God and angels regarding the creation, or not of man, but of Khalifa. You remember what passed between God and the angels? The Holy Quran tells us that the God told angels, when I create Adam, from which Khalifa was to be made, he said, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. That I tell you to obey my Khalifa, not because he's made into a man. He said, when I complete the man, when he's perfected, still he does not deserve to be obeyed by you or by any other. Until I breathe into him, that means I reveal to him my word, until I appoint him as my messenger and prophet. So no one is obliged to obey anyone else in his own right. We are only obliged to obey the prophets of Allah because they are appointed by Allah. And that appointment is what is mentioned in the words, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ فَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and I breathed my ruh into him. That breathing of ruh means revelation by Allah, appointment by Allah. So that first appointed man who became the first Khalifa on earth by Allah, belonging to this line of prophethood, was Adam. But there were other Adams. There is evidence, Adams in the sense of Khulafa. As the Holy Prophet tells us, of other Adams before. For instance, there is evidence of prophethood in Australia's Aborigines, dating back to 40,000 years. So don't overmuch limit the meaning of Adam. It is symbolic. It only indicates the process of creation, of resurgence by Allah, of his deputy on earth, or as we know, his messengers and prophets. So it is that phenomenon which is being disclosed in the Quran. That Adam of which you are talking that happened to be 6,000 years ago, that was brought to limelight and importance only because on the same tree of that Adam, Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to appear. He was to be the summit of that development and evolutionary process. So because the most important event of the creation of man was the creation of the perfect Khalifa, that is Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. Not the first Khalifa, but the final, who is totally perfected and consummated in all designs. That is Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Holy Quran did not take up the example of other lines of prophethoods. The Holy Quran had it confined only to the history of the prophethood which began from Adam and resulted in the creation of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. But it was not unaware. The word of God did not mention name by name other lines of prophets, but in principle it informs us that addressing Hazrat Rasulullah, the Holy Quran says, these are the prophets of which we have told you. And there are many others of which we have not told you at all, but they do exist. Then the Holy Quran tells us, وَإِم مِّنْ أُمَّةٍ إِلَّا خَلَا فِيهَا نَذِيرٌ. There is no people on earth, but among them came the warners. And so on. There are other verses which speak of prophethood having been, delivered by God to all the people of the earth at different times. So maybe some other Adams happened to be before this Adam. We don't know. But still, this is the most important Adam, because from under his progeny, Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to be born. So there is no contradiction between the Quran and the facts revealed by scientific investigations and discoveries.
Le Coran pas dit à nous que Hazrat Adam c'était le premier homme. Mais ce qu'il dit c'était le premier khalifa. Et ça c'est des affaires différentes. Le dialogue qui est entre Allah avec un ange quand il peut créer le khalifa, c'est-à-dire qu'il n'est pas créer l'homme, un homme, mais un khalifa. Le Coran dit comme ça, moi Jésus obéit à lui, c'est-à-dire ce khalifa là, pas parce qu'il y a des hommes, mais seulement je ne pas supposé obéir aussi longtemps qu'il ne m'a pas fait souffler dans lui mon esprit. C'est-à-dire, en d'autres mots, qu'il ne m'a pas fait faire éliminer un prophète. Et c'est ça qui donne sa grandeur-là, éliminer un khalifa. Hazrat Adam, qui mentionnait dans le Coran, c'était le premier homme qui, vient de la terre pour, comme un député d'Allah, et qui représente Allah. Et le Coran mentionne également les autres ban Adam, dans le sens qu'ils ont ban khalifa. Par exemple, il y a une preuve qu'il y a un prophète parmi les aborigènes d'Australie depuis 40 000 années. Donc, Adam, ce n'était qu'un député d'Allah, quelqu'un qui représente Allah de la terre. Et ce phénomène-là, concernant San Adam-là, le Coran cause là seulement parce qu'il est dans la même lignée-là, qui a le plus grand khalifa, c'est-à-dire Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, qui est là pour apparaître à la fin de sa lignée-là. Et c'est comme si le travail le plus important, c'est qu'Allah a créé Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, et non pas sa première Adam-là. C'est-à-dire le dernier est beaucoup plus important que lui. C'est-à-dire c'est ça la raison parce qu'Allah peut créer Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, l'intention pour créer Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam dans sa lignée là, et c'est pourquoi il mentionne ça. Mais ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'est pas dire qu'il est dans les autres ban prophètes, les autres ban Adam. Il y a comme ça, aux autres, c'est dans le verset Coran, il y a comme ça, que ça va adressant le Saint Prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, dit comme ça, ça va le prophète là, il y en a certains dedans qui nous mentionnent d'autres à toi, il y en a d'autres qui ne pas mentionner. Et un autre verset encore, il dit comme ça, qui peut n'a aucun peuple vers qui nous pas finir envoyer le message. Capable définitivement finir dans les autres Adam qui finit exister avant celui-ci. Mais c'est bon pas. Mais il n'y a aucune contradiction entre le fait scientifique et le verset du Saint-Paul.
Okay.
Yes.
Next question, please. Would you advise me when to stop this and turn to the ladies' side?
I think it is better.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I am from Pai branch. Yeah, Huzur, since 1975, at a so-called conference in Islamabad, we are there, resolution... 1974, yes. Since 1974, at a so-called Islamic conference at Islamabad, we were considered...
No, not Islamic conference. Islamic conference took place in 1973 at Lahore, in Lahore. And the decision of the assembly you are referring to was taken in the National Assembly of Pakistan in 1974 at Islamabad.
Thank you. Their resolution have been taken that, and there we are not considered as Muslim, that our faith is not Islam. But at that time, our third Khalifa, Hazrat Nazir Ahmad, Mirza Tahir Ahmad, Mirza Nazir Ahmad, has advised us not to venture for Hajj, for performing Hajj. But nowadays, we see some brothers of us try their chance. I say try their chance to perform the Hajj. My question is there. If my question is there, and also I am worried, but perhaps the years to come, our brethren also will try some others will try their chance also. But my worry is, if ongoing there, they are being identified or being known by the authority concerned. Perhaps it will be a sad for them. It is very sad for them. We don't know what accusation will be on them, and let us believe that it will be the worst one. Perhaps spying or terrorism like this. And they are being tried, put to death or being imprisoned to life sentence. But my question is there, Huzur. I believe that, first of all, it is a lack of obedience toward the Khilafat. And secondly, I ask if this person, or one person who is being killed or who is put to death over there, if he will be considered as a martyr, being a Shahid one. And I ask you, so what is your stand and advice on this issue? Thank you.
You can come to the brief end of the question.
Tout simplement, c'est qu'il peut demander si, comment dire, il y a un frère qui a le fait Hajj actuellement et il est arrivé mort là-bas ou bien emprisonné ou bien accusé de certaines affaires et il est capable peut-être même emprisonné pour la vie là-bas. Si, comment dire, arrive ça, est-ce qu'il, d'après Natir, Comme si Lily trouve ça comme une action qui nous fait, ça va du monde qui peut faire ce travail-là, ça peut faire ça, là, je peux désobéir le calife. Et en même temps, il peut demander si on dit à l'aise de la base de mots, est-ce qu'il peut considérer comme un martyr?
Although your question is slightly different from what I thought it would be, but I would briefly answer a question which I thought you should have asked. Right? What happened in 74? Why did it happen to us? Why were we deprived our fundamental rights to perform not only Hajj but also Salat and give Zakat and become Muslims, say Azan and everything? Why were we declared non-Muslim and to what consequences? And is there any evidence in history that this happened before to any Muslims? I think this should have been the question. My answer is that in 1974, what happened was that a prophecy of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to be fulfilled not against us but in our favor. It was a day of jubilation in reality, although we were very saddened by the decision, but later events told us that it was a blessing in disguise, because a great prophecy of Hazur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to be fulfilled on that day. The prophecy was in relation to the split of Muslims and their division into 72 sects. Having prophesied that, Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam went on to say that there will be a 73rd Jama'ah. As far as the 72 are concerned, he said, Kullum finnare illa wahidatan. All the 72 will be hellbound, and one Jama'ah, which will be 73rd, that will be heavenly bound. So the debate throughout our history had been this, not only our history alone, but the history of Muslim division. Who are the 72 and who is the one? Everybody claimed to be one, as against the others whom they declared they are 72. On the 6th of September 1974, what happened was that this issue was made clear once and for all. The non-Ahmadi 72 sects got together and took pride in the fact that we 72 together declare Ahmadiyyat to be outside the pale of Islam. Outside the pale of Islam or outside the pale of 72. That is the issue. What they were really saying was that we have thrown them out of the pale of 72. And they are the 73rd now. Correct? So as far as the fatwa, the edict is concerned, which fatwa will be taken to be true? The fatwa of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the fatwa of these people? This is the simple issue. The fatwa of Hazrat Aqdas Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was this, that the 73rd one alone would be heavenly bound and 72 will be hellbound. Whether other mullahs like it or not, these are the words of Hazrat Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I can't change them. However bitter they may sound to the others, these are exactly these words. 72 hellbound and 73rd heavenly bound. And what was the fatwa of the Bhutto assembly? It was this, that they are the true Muslim 72, implying that they are heavenly bound. And the one we have thrown out of this pale, they are hellbound, they are non-Muslims. So whom will you believe? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or these mullah, these assembly members of Pakistan? there was a direct confrontation and contradiction. Huzur positively declared that 72 will be hell-bound and one will be heaven-bound. They said no, he didn't know perhaps. One was hell-bound and 72 were heaven-bound. And they did it despite a warning from my predecessor, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis, in the assembly. For God's sake, don't rebel against the decision of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Each one of you has a right to call himself the one, and the rest are 72. But you do have no right to say that 72 were right and one was wrong. This is a rebellion against Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And having received this warning, still they went to do this to prove that we are the only people who are right. There was no longer a debate which of the sects are 72 and which is one. They admitted with pride, we are 72, they are one. Right? So having done that, all that was done to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam should have been done to us, because we could not be heavenly bound unless we were similar to what happened to us, to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers. And this is again what Hazrat Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in response to a question. After he said 72 would be hell-bound and one heavenly bound, one of the Sahaba, one of the present ones, inquired about who they would be, that those blessed people who would be heavenly bound. The answer was, Ma ana alayhi wa ashabi. You should recognize them easily. They will be in a state in which you find me and my followers. So you can recognize them easily. Now what was the state of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers at that time? They were denied the right to say prayer. And even forcibly, Muhammad Rasulullah sallam was teased and persecuted during prayers. And then they were stopped from building mosques and visiting mosques. Man azlamu mimman mana masajid Allah an yuskara fi hasbuhu wa sa'a fi kharabiha. This is the witness, the evidence of the Holy Quran. They were prevented from calling themselves Muslims. They were beaten up for that. Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu was himself beaten up in the courtyard of Kaaba. When he declared, people rushed at him and started beating him, and other Muslims also were beaten just for the crime of calling themselves Muslims. Why not Muslims? Because the kuffar referred to Muslims as Sabis, like we are referred to as Qadianis and Mirzais. And they tell us, we should give you the name, not you yourself. A strange logic. If a child is born to me, I should give him a name, or I have the right to ask anyone else. What a mullah has the right? Where does a mullah have the right to interfere and give the name to my child? So my name is my name. I have to decide what my name is. But mullah said, no, we will give you the name, like the Kuffar Makkah did. So they changed the name from Muslim to Sabi. And they said, call yourself Sabi, all right, we won't bother with you. If you call yourself Muslim, we'll beat you. Then they were deprived, in fact, of all their rights as Muslims. They could not say namaz, they could not call themselves Muslims, they could not say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. They were beaten and dragged in the streets of Mecca. They were almost killed for the crime of declaring themselves to be Muslims and declaring that there is no God but one, and Muhammad Rasulullah was his prophet. And they were forcibly also stopped from performing Hajj. What happened at Hudaybiyah is an evidence which is recorded in the Quran. So all these things were done to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. This was the state in which he was found. If that state was repeated with reference to one or in application to one sect of Islam or one Jamaat of Islam, then according to this prophecy, that Jamaat is the one who will be granted heaven by Allah, who will be called heavenly people. So the thing is made crystal clear. Number one, by the act of declaring themselves to be belonging to the Pale of 72, they sealed their fate forever. Then by the act of admitting us to be the one separate from the 72, they also sealed our fate to be belonging to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. Then what was left in doubt, they made clear by doing all those things which the enemies of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah were doing to him and his followers. So Ma'ana alayhi wa ashabi was fulfilled like you see the sun every day. And when other Muslims sometimes come to ask me this question, I remind them of this fact. I said, of course, in history, there is plenty of evidence that many sects in Islam were declared non-Muslims or kuffar. There are very strong languages used by one sect against the other. That is correct. But still, it does not in any way obscure the evidence in our favor. Because it never happened before that 72 sects of Islam joined hands together and prevented a single Muslim, not a sect, even a single Muslim, from saying Kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It never happened before. It happened at the time of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah and happened at the time of Jamaat Ahmadiyya in 74 onward, never before. Never before Muslim sects joined hands together to prevent any Muslim sect from saying namaz. They debarred them from coming to their mosque, all right. But to say namaz was open, free for everybody until the time of Ahmadiyya. So either this happened at the time of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah or at the time of Masih Maud and his followers. They were never declared not bona fides, not legible for performing Hajj as a whole. But in case of Ahmadiyyat, it happened. And in the case of Masih Maud Islam and his followers, of course it happened. In case of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it also happened. So all the atrocities committed against Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah by his enemies were repeated after 74 and committed against us by the rest of the Muslims. So much so that it is on the official record in a Quetta court case against some Ahmadis that the Ahmadi lawyer inquired from the non-Ahmadi mullah who had pressed charges against Ahmadis, that they were saying kalima, they were saying this and they were saying that. Categorically, he asked him this question: do you know or do you agree to the suggestion that all these things which you are doing to Ahmadis previously were done to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by his enemies? The mullah of Khatm Nabuwat, he said, yes, I know and I agree. This happened before only in case of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah by his enemies. So that is the reason why he declares us to be heaven bound. if we are similar to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah, we have to be heaven bound. Those who are similar to Abu Jahl and others, how could they be heaven bound? But it does not mean that all Muslims should be treated alike. We are talking, and the hadith, I understand, talks of the leaders of this mischief. Otherwise, according to the Quran, in every faith, in every division, there are godly people, God-fearing people who respect the dictates of religion and perform them in the best of the spirits, and who fear Allah and perform everything which is required of them in honesty. Such people, according to the Quran, have nothing to fear. So when I say that, don't overextend this argument, because a hadith must only be interpreted in the light of clear instructions of the Holy Quran and should not be understood in contradiction to the verses of the Quran. So this hadith, I repeat, does not mean that all Muslims belonging to all other sects are hellbound. This is a general statement, which means those Muslims who will be involved in doing the same things to the Jamaat of Masih Maud, which was done before to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah by his enemies, they will be hellbound. And this is logical, this is understandable. So those Muslims who are quiet, who are honest, but who were not brave enough to protest against this injustice, I don't think they are covered by the threat in the hadith that they will be hellbound. May Allah bless them, may Allah save them from destruction, may Allah show them light. But if they do not have courage to come forward and join Ahmadiyyat, let's hope and pray for them that God forgives them and admits them to heaven. Right? Thank you. You think this was a question you should have asked? Now you agree? That's good. Please.
Aujourd'hui, dire comme ça que question que tu viens de demander, c'est qui t'est arrivé en 1974. C'est pas seulement qu'ils ont empêché nous faire Hajj, ils ont empêché nous également faire namaz et comment dire qu'ils nous agir comme un musulman. Et qui fait que tu déclares nous non musulmans. Est-ce qu'il y a quelques évidences, quelques preuves dans l'histoire de ce qui, comment dire, ce qui va nous faire? En fait, vous allez dire qu'effectivement, c'était une réalisation d'une prophétie que le saint prophète Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam il fait. Et sa réalisation-là, pas qu'il nous choqué par ça, mais seulement c'était une petite chose qui était dans nos faveurs. Et c'était ça qui faisait un jour, quand nous étions bien contents. C'était une bénédiction qui était venue d'une façon déguisée. Le prophétie du saint prophète Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam dit comme ça, qui le Oumma est divisé en 72 sectes. Et tous ces 72 là, de tout je poil dans l'enfer, à l'exception d'un Jamaat, cette Jamaat là, il est poil dans le paradis. Alors, tout au long de l'histoire, il y a un débat qui sont là, qui sont 72 là, et qui sont là, qui sont un là. Et ils ont tout, tu peux dire qu'ils ont même ça un là. C'est-à-dire, sur 72 sectes là, tout le temps, tu peux dire qu'ils ont même qui sont un secte qui poil directement dans le paradis. En fait, ce qui vient de passer le 6 septembre 1974, le film fait ça vient bien clair et puis donne une preuve éclatante pour tout le monde, pour tout le temps. Ces 72 sectes là ensemble, je finis décider qu'un Jamaat, c'est-à-dire le Jamaat Ahmadiyya, n'est plus parmi ce groupe, c'est-à-dire parmi ces 72 là, et je finis soi-disant, je finis mettre lui en dehors de l'islam. Ça fait toi qui je finis donner là. Alors, ça fait toi qu'ils ont fini de donner là, c'est-à-dire que Jamaat Ahmadiyya, l'île quoi dans l'enfer, et ils ont tout le pial dans le paradis, et en contradiction avec ce que Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam dit. Parce que le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam dit comme ça, qu'il 72 là poil dans l'enfer et un seul poil dans le paradis. Et donc, vous n'êtes pas capable de changer les paroles du saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. En fait, dans cette assemblée là, il y en a 72 qui tu peux dire, ce que tu peux dire, c'est que je piale dans le paradis, et ça haine là, il piale dans l'enfer. Donc nous trouvons une contradiction directe entre ce que je peux dire avec ce que le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam peut dire, comme si je peux dire que le prophète, il pas tu connais lui. C'est je qui connais, qui sont là qui parlent dans l'enfer et qui sont là qui parlent dans le paradis. Malgré le fait qu'il y a Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih Salis, tu donnes un warning, tu disais comme ça, je n'ai pas besoin de faire aucune rébellion contre les paroles du saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Faire attention avec ce que je peux faire, mais je t'ignore complètement pour prouver, pour prouver que c'était nous. C'est-à-dire, un Jamal, c'était cette Jamal-là qui est vraiment destinée pour aller dans le paradis, et ce 72-là, par une fierté de poil dans l'enfer. Maintenant, quand je fini de faire ça, je besoin prouver à cette terre que toute chose que tu fais contre le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, toute chose que tu fais contre toute bonne action que tu prends contre le saint prophète par ce bon ennemi, c'est une bonne action que tu prends contre nous. Et nous, d'une certaine façon, comme si tu dessinais que nous tu marches dans le même chemin du saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Et quand on s'arrête, tu demandes le saint prophète, et ça, un groupe là qui s'en a ça, il dit comme ça, ce groupe là, c'est ban du monde qui se boudent à l'état que moi avec mon ban ashab était. Et effectivement, quand vous regardez l'histoire, le saint prophète Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, maintenant tu empêches de faire namaz, tu empêches lui et ce man suivant arrange dans la mosquée, et là où je cite un verset dans le Coran, dit comme ça, qui sont là qui plus mauvais, qui empêchent du monde de namaz dans la masjid, etc. Et c'est ban naïm qui comme dire tu empêches de faire de nazan. Même Hazrat Umar, tu gagnes battu dans Kaaba, dans l'enceinte de la Kaaba, quand tu dis qu'il y a un musulman, et maintenant c'est que tu peux dire, tu n'as pas le droit de dire que tu es un musulman, tu as besoin de dire que tu es un sabi. De la même façon, je dis à nous comme ça, je n'ai pas le droit de dire que vous êtes musulman, je suis un Kaziani et je suis un Mézaï. C'est comme si je qui donne nous non, et ce n'est pas nous qui gagnons le droit de choisir nous non. Alors, pareil, comment ça va un croyant de la Mecque là, qui tu peux dire, qui vient dire sabi et non pas musulman. Et ce que je fais faire encore, je fais prendre tout le droit comme un musulman. Pareil comme un musulman du saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Tu gagnes battu, tu sors les autres dans le chemin, un risque dans le chemin, et tu empêches de faire hajj, sans le trouver avec ça, un événement qui est arrivé à Abu Dhabi là. Ça, c'était l'état de ban compagnon du saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Donc, si, comme on dit, vous trouvez une jamaat, dans cet état-là, définitivement, cette jamaat-là, il est dans le paradis. Quand on a fini de dire que ce 72-là, comme si je finis d'écrire ce destin, même pour toujours. Et quand je finis de déclarer nous, c'est lui qui est en dehors de l'islam, et pour ainsi dire, je finis seul le destin pour toujours. N'importe qui va dire qui est en doute, je finis de faire bien clair quand je finis de faire les mêmes affaires en nous. Il y a certains musulmans, quand je finis de poser cette question-là, je dis comme ça qu'il y a plusieurs, les autres sectes parmi les musulmans, qu'il y a les autres musulmans comme s'ils finissent de déclarer non musulmans. Je finis de servir un mauvais langage aussi contre les autres sectes. Mais de toute façon, vous allez dire, ça pas retirer cette preuve qu'il y a dans nos faveurs là. Jamais dans l'histoire, 72 sectes ensemble, fin marié piqué, comme on dit en créole, pour dire, pour empêcher un secte de dire la ilaha illallah. Ces affaires sont arrivées seulement dans l'époque du saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam et dans l'époque. Jamais, de tout ensemble, qui empêche un groupe lié à namaz, excepté qu'ils se empêchent le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam avec ce bon compagnon pas lié à namaz et se empêchent Ban al-Mahdi pas lié à namaz. De la même façon pour Hajj, jamais, on dit que tu empêches qui groupe à le faire Hajj, mais dans l'histoire, tu empêches le saint prophète et je empêche un compagnon de Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam. Tout ça, une atrocité que tu commets contre le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, je répète ça contre nous. Et ça d'ailleurs, je même mettre dans un record d'un cas dans la cour dans Quetta, Là-bas, tu poses une question, un moula, tu dis comme ça, est-ce que vous d'accord qui c'est qui vous peut faire contre Ben Ahmadi là? C'était simple, ben ennemi du saint prophète qui fait contre lui. Moula, tu dis oui, nous d'accord. Mais seulement il y a une petite chose que vous devez faire bien clair, ça veut dire que tout bon musulman peut aller dans l'enfer. C'est tout simplement, ça hadith là qui concerne ben chef. C'est eux qui commencent à jouer un grand rôle là-dedans. Parce que le Coran dit comme ça, que dans chaque groupe, chaque religion, il y a des gens qui ont la crainte d'Allah et ils font leur devoir bien, et bien ça va dire pour père. Et nous pas besoin de nous étendre ce hadith là sur signification trop loin pour faire croire que tout bon musulman peut aller dans l'enfer. Donc ça c'est pas une croyance ça. Nous devons toujours interpréter un hadith à la lumière du Saint-Coran. Je répète ça aux autres dire que pas tout bon musulman peut aller dans l'enfer. Mais seulement ban dimoun qui finit agir pareil comme un ennemi du Saint-Prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Mais pas ban les autres. Ban les autres là, si je peux faire ce travail bien, mais seulement je peux avoir courage, comment dire, pour dénoncer ça, une mauvaise pratique qui peut faire contre nous, Jamaat là, nous devoirs qui nous besoin faire droit aux autres, et nous demandons là qu'il y ouvre les cœurs et qu'il pardonne aux autres pour ça, manque de courage qu'ils ont.
I think it's time perhaps.
He said that by Said, he was saying if some people go to.
You see, I have asked him, he says my question is answered. So it's your question now. He's satisfied, it's okay. Now, let's turn, because the time is shortage of time, let's turn now to the one or two ladies' questions. And the remaining, keep in your custody tomorrow or the day after, whenever we meet, inshallah, we'll attend to them. We'll begin with ladies' side next time, inshallah.
According to Islam, we know that we should not take loan for the purpose of building a house for us because of interest. Does that restriction also apply to government scheme made specially for lodging, which is also based on loan and interest? Thank you, Huzu.
You see, nowadays the system in currency regarding the buying of houses on interest. I'm sorry, yes.
D'après l'islam, nous connaissons qu'il nous pas gagner droit pour l'argent ou l'intérêt pour rendre la case. Est-ce que ça applique également pour un scheme que le gouvernement met en avant pour faire vendre de la case qui est basé sur l'intérêt? C'est ça la question.
You see, nowadays the financial system current in the world has become so ambiguous that at times you find elements of prohibition according to Islam in certain things, and at times you find there is, according to some at least, there is room for declaring those acts to be legal in Islam. Because everything is confused, and the term usually, or rather I should say interest, is generally and widely applied to all acts of business and trade, etc. So we have to be very careful in determining which portion of a contract is illegal in Islam and which portion is legitimate and permissible. Now, with regards to the buying of houses, after borrowing money from some housing schemes, etc., or from government funds or banks on loan, borrowing on interest, there is something which has always been bothering me, and I want to make it clear to you. You see, there is another scheme which speaks of hire purchase. Now, this hire purchase scheme is generally understood to be all right, because in the hire purchase scheme it is said that you buy a thing, it becomes yours, but you pay more price than if you had bought it in cash. You pay in installments, and because it is not yet yours, you have not finished the whole payment of the whole price. So because you are benefiting it while it is not yet yours, you pay sort of rental to that in exchange for that benefit you are drawing. So that was called hire purchase scheme. Now I believe that this is very close to the present day buying of houses, not entirely so, but similar to the buying of houses by borrowing money on interest. Because what happens is, you have not yet paid for the house. It will take you maybe 25 installments or more, 25 years sometimes. Then the house would become yours. And yet, you possess the house as if it is yours. And what you pay towards interest is less than what you might have paid towards the rent of that house. You see, if you had taken it on rental, I have calculated in England, this is exactly how it works. So although this may be called interest, but in real sense, in real terms, what does it amount to? What should it be called and labeled? This is the question. If some Ahmadis are prevented from buying houses on this scheme, what they do instead would be that they will be paying heavy rents for the houses which do not belong to them, and they may use them for 25 years or so. They go on paying rising rents, and there will be no security for them, and the house will remain somebody else's. The other alternative is that you don't consider it as interest. You consider it as a rent, because practically that house is not your possession, in fact, because you have not paid for it. So, but for all practical purposes it is yours, and you have saved interest, saved rent, and that rent you are paying is called interest by these banks and other financial houses. So nomenclature does not prove anything or disprove anything. You must go into the merit of every case and analyze the contract, and if you think that it is more in favor of interest, which is forbidden in Islam, then leave it. But if you think that it is the product of a financial system in which Muslims have no control, where good has got mixed up with evil, and where for the sake of survival you could give some licenses to these terminologies and understand them in real terms, not in just the way they are, coined as terms. So their coinage of these terms does not necessarily mean that they are right in this application. Sometimes what they call is interest may not be interest. Sometimes what they call profit may be interest. This happens. So it is not just what they call something. We must study the matter in its in its entirety, and study the conditions attached to the bargain, and then in light of the Islamic teaching we should try to find out whether in actual reality what they call interest is interest, and whether in actual reality what they call profit is profit. So there are many such cases of so-called profits. I have told Jamaat not to touch even with a 10-foot pole, because they in reality are interests. They call them profits. Like in Pakistan, new banking system, in the name of profits, they have been giving interest to people. So these are all the thinkings allowed which I have shared with you. So that is why I have not so far strictly forbidden Ahmadis from buying houses on these so-called interest schemes. I think the case is not clear. It shares two different categories, and for the sake of the general welfare of Ummah, I think they should not be prevented from doing this. But at the same time, I have been telling all Ahmadis who come to consult me that don't go for a second house. That will be trade, entirely trade, with the greed to earn something because of interest. But the house which you occupy, that can be explained away by the fact that you have to pay rent for that. So what you are paying towards so-called interest, you may satisfy yourself by saying, no, it is the rent I had to pay anyway. And because the interest is generally larger than the rent, so this justification is valid. It is not just an excuse made up by one's own mind. So I am clarifying all this in the light of what I am saying. It emerges that in this case, if you go for one house which you occupy and pay the so-called interest because you have to pay the rent anyway, that should be not as clearly forbidden as other cases, similar cases. But if you are having another house, living there, buy another house on these terms, then you can't say I'm paying rent. There is sheer interest. So I always tell Ahmadis not to go for the second one. The first is necessity plus has some justification. The second is sheer trade on interest. Have I made myself clear? It took me long because it was a bit confusing matter. I had to make it clear from one angle and the other. So forgive me if I have taken over much long in trying to explain, but I couldn't do it in shorter words.
For me, it will be easier. I can give them a summary.
Good.
Vous vous dire comme ça qu'actuellement le système financier qui existait dans le monde est un peu ambigu. Et une fois on trouve certains éléments dedans qui disent il y a certaines petites choses qui n'ont pas le droit à faire. Mais par contre, il y a les autres affaires que vous trouvez qui peut-être du point de vue islamique n'est pas légal. Actuellement, par exemple, vous avez vu le mot intérêt, il y a une application bien large. Et nous disons, nous, ce que nous essayons de faire, nous essayons de comprendre c'est quoi ces affaires que je t'appelle l'intérêt là. Si pas vraiment l'intérêt ça ou bien il est capable d'une autre chose. J'ai sa question de loan pour la casa, tout le temps, il préoccupe moi. Et moi, j'ai un peu en doute là. Après, il m'a fait réfléchir à une affaire que je t'appelle vente à tempérament. On appelle ça ici, c'est comme on connaît, on dit une affaire qui a acheté contre mammouth. Alors, il y a purchase. J'ai ça, on va dire, ou juillet une petite chose, mais il n'est pas encore venu pour vous. Mais si on va dire, c'est-à-dire, vous payez par installment. Mais par contre, vous payez beaucoup plus que vous payez si on va dire, vous êtes capable de payer cash. Mais nous sommes capables d'appeler ça, vous avez fait une similarité, une petite comparaison entre sa façon d'acheter une petite chose là avec le fait que vous achetez la case, loan, que vous payez pendant 25 ans. Parce que ça l'intérêt que vous payez par mois là, il est capable de moins que le loyer que vous payez tous les mois. Alors, dans ce cas-là, peut-être nous pas besoin d'appeler l'intérêt, nous avons besoin de lien de l'autre mot. Et si vous dire ou pas penser à un système qui existait là, ou accepter, ou vous besoin d'aller là, payer le loyer pendant peut-être 25 ans, 30 ans, et jamais la case là pour venir pour vous. Tandis qu'il y a ce système de loan là, vous payez le loyer, vous payez l'intérêt, mais éventuellement la case là vient pour vous. Et c'est que vous sauvez dedans, c'est que vous finissez comme juillet de la case là, c'est pas un bénéfice qui est là. Alors, ce que vous pouvez faire, vous analysez le contrat bien. Si comment dire, vous trouvez pur l'intérêt même, vous pouvez quitter. Mais parfois, vous pouvez trouver comment dire qu'il y a quelque chose, un élément qui est bon dedans, et un quelque chose qui est mauvais aussi. Et vous pouvez essayer de faire une démarche pour comprendre bien. Et vous pas besoin de ce qui les autres du monde disent c'est pas l'intérêt ou bien pas l'intérêt. Parfois, ce qu'ils appellent l'intérêt, il n'est pas l'intérêt. Parfois, ce qu'ils appellent profit, il n'est pas profit, il est l'intérêt. Alors, vous êtes considéré tout ce facteur-là bien. Vous avez connu ce pas l'intérêt ou bien qui il était exactement. Et moi, vous autres, moi, je ne vais pas faire un empêchement, on me dit, strictement, pour vous imprégner la case qui je prends à l'eau. Parce que pour le bien-être de tout le monde, c'est correct. Mais c'est jamais je vous essayer de servir ce scheme-là pour vous gagner une deuxième la case. Parce que de toute façon, au premier la case là, ça vous capable de justifier par le fait que vous avez payé le loyer. Mais deuxième la case, définitivement, il ne peut pas permettre ça. En fait, c'est ça que vous avez dit qu'il cause un petit peu au doigt de ce qui vient de faire qu'il peut venir sur l'esprit, et voilà ce qu'il finit de ce sujet.
Yeah. Should it be the last, or would you like to have another question?
What do you like?
No, have we covered only one question from ladies?
Yes, one.
We have another one. Out of pity for them, you know.
This one is a short one, but there are two. A non-Ahmadi Muslim lady wants to know if she can take bayat to join the Ahmadiyya movement without letting her husband know about it. I'll translate.
Yes, please translate it first.
And Madame non-Ahmadi voudrait connaître si elle est capable de prendre bayat sans qu'il laisse son mari au courant de ça.
We know that Pharaoh's wife was a believer. And I doubt if she took permission from Pharaoh.
Aux autres dire comme ça que nous connaissons que la madame de Pharaon est un croyant.
Yes.
Je doute qu'il prend permission avec Pharaon pour lui devenir croyant.
Yes.
C'est-à-dire en d'autres mots qu'il.
That's all I have to say. She didn't take permission from Pharaoh. Next, please.
If we forget to read the Dua Qanut in the third rakat of the witr, just before sajda, how should we correct it?
You can't. It's all right. Still the namaz will be good.
Namaz will be correct, pas qu'on a rien de lacune dedans, si on finit oublier.
So if the questions are like this, have some more. Right.
No, I mean, he's sending questions that have already been answered.
What's happening? Eh? Because he has a very good sense of humor, so he's playing a joke on you.
In a well-known hadith, the Holy Prophet said that the name of the Messiah's mother and father would be the same as his mother and father. Please explain the meaning of Chirag Bibi and Abdullah in relation with Amina and Ghulam Murtaza. Also, justify the names Al-Hakam and Al-Adil given by the Prophet to the promised Messiah.
As far as the first part is concerned, I'm sorry, yes.
Dans un hadith, le prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam dit comme ça que la maman du Messie et son papa prennent le même nom que le prophète, sa maman et son papa. Demande Ouzour explique la signification de Chirag Bibi, c'est-à-dire le nom de la maman de Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam, et Abdullah, en relation avec le nom Amina et Ghulam Murtaza. Et également justifier le nom Al-Hakam et Al-Adl que le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qui donne le Messie.
as far as this tradition is concerned, which has been referred to by the lady, she must have mistaken, because it is contradictory to other traditions of Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He declared categorically, repeatedly, without a shadow of doubt, that the Masih, the promised one, would be Ibn Maryam. So how could he forget that and say the mother of his name would be the mother of my name, the name of my mother, that is Amna. See, it is self-contradictory. So she should find out first what the hadith is and should not rely over much on her memory. Then we will resolve it. That so-called hadith about Masih is obviously wrong. Because Rasulullah said, the mother of Masih, Isa Masih, would be Ibn Maryam. Mother's name would be Maryam. Right? How could you say in the next breath that his name, the mother's name would be that of my mother, Amna? So, unless the contradiction is removed, I can't answer this.
Sa tradition qui fait une cité là, il n'est pas correct, il est en contradiction avec les autres traditions qu'il nous connaît, parce que plusieurs fois le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam fait dire qu'il est le Messie pour Ibn Maryam, c'est-à-dire le nom de sa maman pour Maryam. Donc il n'est pas capable de dire ces affaires-là et en même temps il oublier. Donc la dame, une soeur qui vient d'envoyer sa question-là, il visait vérifier hadith là et pas trop faire confiance aux mémoires.
But there is another hadith regarding Imam Mahdi, not regarding Masih, with which the lady might have got confused this hadith, got mixed it up with that. That hadith speaks not only of the fact that the name of the Imam Mahdi would be Muhammad, my name, the name of his mother would be that of my mother's name, that is Amna. The name of his father would be that of my father, which is Abdullah. It says about Mahdi, not about Masih. But it goes on to say that he will be buried Mai fi qabri, in my grave with me, in the same place. Now that is the key to the understanding of all this hadith. There are some claimants to Mahdihood whose mother's name, whose own name was actually Muhammad. If you study the history of Mahdihood, the claimants to Mahdihood I mean, there are certain so-called Mahdis whose name was Muhammad, whose mother's name was Amna, whose father's name was Abdullah, and yet they were rejected. Why? The hadith apparently got fulfilled. Because every human being realizes, knows this, that these things can happen accidentally. There's so many people who are born to an Abdullah and an Amna, and out of seeking blessing from this coincidence, they name their child as Muhammad. So that happened so many times. So if some of them gets this into his head, that because my father is Abdullah, my mother is Amna, I am Muhammad, why not be a Mahdi as well, as a byproduct. And this is exactly what happened. Why did they not believe in such a thing? Because the hadith went on to say, he would be buried in my grave, in my grave with me. So they must have waited for his death. Until such a claimant died and was buried in Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grave, he would not be accepted. And who would accept him after death? And what is this joke about raising somebody? People waiting for centuries upon centuries for Imam Mahdi to come. who happens to have by coincidence or by accident the same name as Rasulullah Sallam's and his parents also having the same names, but people are waiting. No, the last condition is not fulfilled, which is more important. These are accidents, that is a very rare thing to happen, that's not accident. So if somebody dies rejected, who on earth would permit him to be buried with Rasulullah? So you're talking of impossibilities. Unless you interpret it differently, metaphorically. If somebody says, his name is that of mine, his mother's name is that of my mother's, father's name, it means his origin is the same. He's as true as I am. Not in the meaning that Rasulullah Sallam is equal to somebody else, or somebody else is equal to Rasulullah Sallam. Only in the meaning that all prophets of Allah are true regarding their claim. So metaphorically this can be understood to mean that he comes from God like I came from God. If you blame him, if you throw stones at him, as if you are blaming me and throwing stones at me, if you censure his mother and father as if you are doing the same to my mother and my father, there is a style of saying things to indicate closeness with somebody. And when you say somebody would be buried in my grave, it means his end would be that of mine. It can only be understood metaphorically, because it's impossible for a Muslim to conceive that Rasulullah's grave would be dug up for any Imam Mahdi or anybody who he may be, and somebody, whatever he is, would be buried after opening the grave of Rasulullah. So that last bit provides us with the key of understanding, key to understanding. The whole address is metaphorical, not literal. And in metaphorical understanding, it only means his beginning will be my beginning, his end will be my end. He will be as if I am. If you oppose him, if you abuse him, if you reject him, as if you are doing the same things to me. That is the meaning which I understand, and there is no contradiction in this. No objection. But the other meaning is full of objections.
Aujourd'hui, il y a un hadith concernant l'imam Mahdi. Peut-être que sa soeur qui envoie sa question-là, il fait une confusion avec ça. Et dans ce hadith-là, il dit comme ça que le nom du Mahdi ou mon nom, et le nom de ce papa ou le nom de mon papa, et le nom de ce maman ou le nom de mon maman. Et l'époux enterré dans le propre tombe. Alors, pour nous comprendre ça, l'islam, c'est sa dernière morceau-là qui aide nous à comprendre, c'est-à-dire qui est enterré dans mon propre tombe. Il y a plusieurs gens qui viennent venir et qui se font déclarer le Mahdi, et le nom c'est Mohammed, et le maman son nom c'est Amina, et le papa son nom c'est Abdullah. Et c'est moi qui tout fin rejeté. Parce qu'il fait ces affaires-là, quand va arriver accidentellement, une madame qui s'appelle Amina, elle est mariée avec un monsieur qui s'appelle Abdullah. Et puis il y a un garçon qui s'appelle Mohammed. Et puis il y a un garçon qui a grandi. Il dit comme ça, puisque mon papa appelle Abdullah, mon maman appelle Amina, dès qu'il fait maman Mohammed, puisque le prophète dit qu'il y a un hadith, le Mahdi, ou dans sa situation-là, alors ça dit mon il aussi il déclare comme Mahdi. Mais tout cela finit rejeté. Ces affaires qu'il dit qu'il est pour enterrer dans mon tombe avec moi, il n'est pas capable d'accepter aussi longtemps que moi j'ai dit mon n'a pas de mots. Parce que là, c'est les fins de mots. Si un monde fait de mots, mais qui c'est là qui peut accepter quand il fait de mots. Et si un monde est rejeté, comment un monde peut être d'accord qu'il a enterré ensemble avec le saint prophète sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Donc, aussi longtemps que nous ne comprenons pas sa signification là, de maman, papa, dans une façon métaphorique, nous va pas soulever ce problème-là. C'est-à-dire quand il dit qu'il se maman avec mon papa, comme si pour le même, ça veut dire qu'il se origine pour le même. Parce que tout bon prophète de venir et je vrai prophète et je sais que je déclarais vrai et tout ça là il vient d'Allah. C'est-à-dire c'est origine le même. Comme si quand on peut rejeter ce prophète là, on peut rejeter moi-même. Et là aujourd'hui qui enterre dans mon tome là, c'est-à-dire que sur la fin, pour parler du moment de la fin. Et nous faisons comprendre ça d'une façon métaphorique et non pas littérale. C'est-à-dire que ce prophète-là, ça m'a dit là, ce commencement pour parler pour moi, sur la fin aussi pour parler pour moi. Et quand il est pour là, comment dire moi-même qu'il a. N'importe qui je te fais aller, c'est comme si je peux faire ça à moi.